May 1945. Europe is celebrating. The ink on the Allied unity posters isn't even dry, and Churchill is already planning a new war against the USSR, with German soldiers in the vanguard. This isn't conspiracy theory. It's a folder in the British National Archives, declassified in the mid-1990s. For 53 years, it sat under a secrecy classification, and it was not the only folder nobody was rushing to open. World War II is the most studied war in history. Thousands of books, hundreds of films, parades every year, speeches about the triumph of good over evil delivered in exactly the same tone for 80 years running. And yet, parts of the archive are still classified. Not the losers' archives, the winners. Behind the official picture is a different story. Not an alternative one, a parallel one, documented. The one people knew but preferred not to tell, because it makes the word victory considerably more complicated than anyone wanted. 10 secrets. You're watching Academic Troll, the channel for people who want to know more without being bored to death in the process. Like, subscribe, let's go.
Secret number 1, the double game, how Britain ran German intelligence. By 1941, MI5 had established something remarkable. Every single German agent dropped into Britain had either been captured or had come forward to offer their services. Every one, not a single one missed. The Abwehr was convinced it had a sprawling network in place. Reports came in regularly, coordinates, troop movements, numbers, all of it written by British officers sitting in offices in London. The finest double agent was Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, a Spaniard with no intelligence training whatsoever, initially turned down by the British. He went to the Germans instead, convinced them he was working for the Reich, and started filing reports from Lisbon. Only then did the British realize what they had. Over time, Garbo built an elaborate network of fictitious sub-agents, every single one invented by him personally. The Germans faithfully paid salaries to people who did not exist. The result? The Iron Cross from Germany and the MBE from Britain, decorated by both sides of the same war. His finest hour? June 1944. Garbo convinced Berlin the invasion would land at Pas-de-Calais. 15 German divisions waited there while the Allies came ashore in Normandy. Intelligence is theater. The Germans bought a ticket and applauded the performance being run against them until the curtain fell.
Secret number 2, the Reich's gold. Where did Hitler's money go? When an empire collapses, the first thing to disappear is the money. By 1945, Nazi Germany had looted more than any state in history. Gold from the central banks of occupied countries, paintings, libraries, jewelry stripped from Jews before deportation, and most grotesque of all, gold smelted from the dental crowns and wedding rings of people who had just been murdered. Most of it vanished. Switzerland during the war was an island of neutrality, a pretty legend. In practice, a laundry. Swiss banks accepted Nazi gold, converted it into hard currency, and gave the Reich the ability to purchase strategic materials on the world market. Without Swiss francs, the German war machine would have stopped running years earlier. This is not speculation. It is the conclusion of a commission established by the Swiss government itself in 1996. It took 50 years for a country to admit to itself what it had been doing. Argentina is a separate chapter. In 1945, German submarines surface off the Argentine coast months after the surrender. Not empty. Gold, documents, people. Perón arranged a rat line for Nazi fugitives at considerable price. Money has no nationality. It doesn't lose wars. It simply changes hands, quietly, without obituaries or parades. The Reich collapsed. Its balance sheet survived.
Secret number 3, Unit 731, the science that killed. Official name, Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. Perfect cover, bureaucratic, tedious, entirely innocuous. Behind it, the largest biological weapons program in history. The victims were called logs. Not people, logs. No name means no crime. Between 3,000 and 10,000 people passed through the unit, infected with plague, cholera, and typhoid while researchers took notes. Frostbitten to document at what temperature tissue dies. Vivisected without anesthesia. Anesthesia would have skewed the results. This was science, methodical with charts and conclusions, which is precisely what makes it unbearable. In 1945, the unit's commander, General Ishii, burned the barracks, killed the remaining prisoners, and disappeared into the civilian population. American intelligence tracked him down in 1946. Ishii offered a deal, all experimental data in exchange for full immunity. The United States agreed. MacArthur personally authorized it. Nobody from the leadership was ever prosecuted. Ishii died in 1959, in his own bed. Science without ethics is a technology of destruction. With good funding,
The immunity granted to its authors is not the pragmatism of victors. It's complicity, just filed on official letterhead.
Secret number 4. Who actually won the Battle of Britain? Summer 1940. Churchill delivered the speech. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so much to so few. Posters, parades, national pride cast in bronze. The few were not only British. The RAF was desperately short of pilots. The French campaign had wiped out experienced flyers, and into the squadrons came men with unfamiliar names, and one thing in common: they had nothing left to lose. Hitler had already taken everything. Poles, Czechs, Belgians, French, Dutch, Canadians, 15 nations in the same sky. The Poles were something else entirely. Poland no longer existed, divided between Germany and the USSR in 1939. Polish airmen arrived in Britain without a country, without a home, without any prospect of going back. British command kept them out of combat for months. When they were finally let in, number 303 Polish Squadron shot down more German aircraft in 6 weeks than any other squadron in the RAF. After the war, London held a victory parade. The Poles were not invited. Stalin had made clear it was politically unacceptable. Churchill said nothing. Polish airmen watched from the crowd as civilians, as strangers in the city whose sky they had defended. The sky doesn't ask for your passport. The ground does, and doesn't always give the right answer. Secret number 5. Operation Unthinkable: How Churchill Planned World War III. July 1st, 1945. The planned date for a strike against Soviet forces. 47 British and American divisions. And here's the detail. 10 divisions of German soldiers, just taken prisoner, not yet disarmed. Yesterday's enemy as the advance guard against yesterday's ally. The operation was called Unthinkable. Churchill had a gift for names. He had never trusted Stalin. The wartime alliance was a forced marriage. 2 men who shook hands over an abyss because there was no alternative. But victory changed the geometry. Soviet troops stood in the middle of Europe, and what had arrived as liberation could stay as occupation, permanently. British generals studied the plan and answered honestly. No chance. The USSR had 3 times as many soldiers in Europe. The Allied armies were exhausted. The public wanted to go home, not to another war. The plan was quietly shelved. Stalin knew about it through intelligence, said nothing publicly, simply drew his conclusions. The only thing that stopped Operation Unthinkable was not morality, not Allied obligation. Plain arithmetic. Victory is always just a pause. The next war starts being planned before the surrender documents are signed.
Secret number 6. Antarctica, the Reich's last outpost? 1938, Germany dispatches an Antarctic expedition. Aircraft drop metal swastika flags onto the ice. The territory is named Neuschwabenland. Germany stakes a formal territorial claim. Established historical fact. Nobody disputes it. After that, the documents run out, and the questions begin. August 1945. The war is over, and right now 2 German submarines surface off the Argentine coast, months after the surrender. Not warships, useless to anyone by then, but not empty either. The crews surrender. The commanders say nothing. 1946, the United States sends an expedition to Antarctica. 13 ships, 23 aircraft, nearly 5,000 soldiers. The stated purpose is science. An aircraft carrier and a full military force is roughly 10 times more than science has ever needed. The expedition was cut short ahead of schedule. Rear Admiral Byrd gave one interview afterwards and mentioned in passing an adversary capable of flying from pole to pole at extraordinary speed. The recording exists. He was not asked to elaborate. Nobody followed up. 3 facts. No explanation that connects them cleanly. Germany claimed the ice. Submarines surfaced months after Germany ceased to exist. America sent an armada and filed nothing. The coldest place on Earth. The warmest secrets.
Secret number 7. The atomic bomb. Why they dropped the second one? August 6, 1945, Hiroshima. 80,000 dead instantly, as many again over the following months. The Japanese government is in shock. The Imperial Council convenes, negotiations begin. 3 days later, Nagasaki. The version for the history books: Japan refused to surrender, an invasion would have cost millions of lives, the bombs were the lesser evil. Airtight logic, as long as you don't ask the next question. 3 days is nowhere near enough time for a major power to process a blow of that scale and capitulate. American command knew this. And still, August 9th. Because on August 8th, the USSR declared war on Japan, and Soviet troops entered Manchuria. If Japan surrenders under Soviet pressure, Moscow gains a seat at the post-war Pacific table. If it surrenders after a second American bomb, it surrenders to America alone. Several historians say this directly. Nagasaki was a political signal to Moscow. Admiral Leahy called it barbarism.
Eisenhower told the Secretary of War that Japan was already prepared to surrender. These voices stayed inside the room. 70,000 people died in Nagasaki. The nuclear age didn't begin at Hiroshima. It began at Nagasaki, when it became clear the weapon could be used twice, which meant as many times as political necessity required.
Secret number 8. Operation Paperclip: How America Stole Hitler's Science. Nuremberg, 1945. The tribunal is trying Nazi war criminals. Behind the scenes, American officers are driving through the ruins of Germany with a list of names. Find them before the Soviets do, who are doing exactly the same thing. Operation Paperclip. The name is almost comic. The scale is historical. Werner von Braun had been bombing London with V-2 rockets. 3,000 launches, 9,000 dead, plus thousands of forced laborers in factories attached to Buchenwald. He visited those factories. He signed the requisition orders. In May 1945, he surrendered to the Americans with a list of 120 specialists as a package deal. His file: party member since 1937, SS Sturmbannführer, documented connection to forced labor. The file wasn't destroyed. It was repainted. SS membership whited out, clean biography attached. The State Department objected, Justice Department objected, Truman banned it. The Army did it anyway. In 1969, his rocket carried men to the moon. America was first on the moon because Germany was first in space. Germany was first in space because it had no ethical constraints on slave labor. Short chain, straight line, uncomfortable. His biography in official sources begins around 1945. Everything before is attached with a paperclip, and the clip is still holding. Secret number 9. The Amber Room, the most expensive disappearance in history. 8 tons of amber, gold, and precious stones. Value up to $500 million. Location? Unknown, since 1945. September 1941, the Germans are advancing on Leningrad. Soviet museum staff try to evacuate the room. The panels crumble on contact, there's no time, they paste paper and gauze over the surface and hope it won't be noticed. It was noticed within 20 minutes. A specialist team disassembled and crated everything in 36 hours, professionally, carefully, methodically. The crates went to Königsberg. The room was last seen in January 1945. Soviet forces closing in, fire in the castle, soldiers enter. No amber panels. Not intact, not burned, nothing at all. More than 100 expeditions since. Mines, tunnels, lake beds, forests, nothing. Then 1997. 2 Germans offer a fragment of amber mosaic for sale. Apparently genuine, which means something survived. Something spent 50 years somewhere waiting. The sellers were detained. Where it came from, never established. $500 million, 100 expeditions, 1 fragment with no return address. History knows, history isn't saying. Secret number 10. Who knew about Pearl Harbor in advance? December 7th, 1941, 7:48 a.m. Hawaii. 2 hours later, 4 battleships are on the bottom, 350 aircraft destroyed, 2,403 Americans dead. Roosevelt called it a date which will live in infamy. America entered the war. It all happened exactly as Roosevelt needed it to. He was in a political trap. Without America, Britain would not survive. But 80% of Americans were against the war, and Congress was blocking every move. He needed a provocation so visceral the public would demand war themselves. 3 weeks before the attack, the carrier groups went silent. No radio, no position, gone. Days before the strike, Washington received an intercept. The Japanese consul in Honolulu ordered to map the harbor by sector and track ship movements. That is not diplomacy. That is a targeting grid. Analysts decoded it. Pearl Harbor was not warned. The strongest argument of those who refused to call this negligence: what was not in the harbor that morning? The battleships, obsolete, expendable, remained. The carriers did not. Congress investigated 8 times. Each time, negligence, not conspiracy. Each time, new documents, new questions. The archive remains partially sealed. On a long enough timeline, accidents have a habit of coinciding with somebody's interests. What we are left with. The story of World War II, as it was told to us, is a story of good defeating evil. Clear, comprehensible, comforting. It's not a lie, but it's not the whole truth. The whole truth contains allies making deals with the devil and calling it pragmatism, taking the science of killers and calling it necessity, leaving victims without justice and calling it the cost of winning. Good won, but along the way it did things it preferred not to discuss.
The Amber Room has not been found. Parts of the archive are still sealed. 80 years have passed, and not all the accounts have been settled. History isn't a museum. It's the thing that's still running. Through borders on maps, through nuclear standoffs, through alliances and enmities, in an unbroken line from 1945 to today. 80 million dead deserve more than a clean portrait. They deserve the truth, however uncomfortable it turns out to be. That's what this channel is for. That's all from me. Other channels usually spend the outro begging you to like, subscribe, and comment. I won't even mention it. I'll just see you in the next 10.